Hello, and thanks for stopping by. Today I'm on Trafalgar Square, which, being a popular tourist destination in the very heart of London, is probably one of the most photographed locations in the world. I even snapped one of my first ever photographs here back in 1986. There are two roads connected to the western end of Trafalgar Square, Pall Mall East and Cockspur Street, between which you'll find Oceanic House, a rather grand building which opened in 1907. Despite being so close to Trafalgar Square, it always feels a little quieter here, and few people seem to pay this spot much attention. And that's a real shame when you consider that Oceanic House provided the backdrop for one of the 20th century's most iconic images. This famous photograph was taken on the 16th of April 1912 as news of the Titanic's disastrous sinking, which had occurred in the freezing cold waters of the North Atlantic during the night of the 14th and the early hours of the 15th of April, was quickly beginning to spread. The infamous ship was owned by the Liverpool-based White Star Line, and Oceanic House, the official address of which is No. 1 Cockspur Street, was their London office. Indeed, tickets for the Titanic's doomed maiden voyage had been available to purchase from here. It's no surprise then that Oceanic House became a major focal point that day, as people flocked to the office in a desperate bid to scour information about missing friends and loved ones. Sadly, the young fellow seen here selling newspapers about the disaster would himself suffer a tragic fate. The lad's name was Edward John Parfit, Ned for short, and he was born on the 21st of July 1896, meaning he was just short of 16 when this photograph was taken. Ned and his family lived at number 50 Elm Street, Lambeth, the same home in which he'd been born, which was off of Cornwall Road, just moments away from the mighty Waterloo Railway Terminal and its associated station, Waterloo Junction, now known as Waterloo East. Going off on a slight tangent for a moment, Waterloo itself shares a connection with the Titanic, for it was from here that a number of special boat trains transported passengers from London to Southampton docks, at which point they could directly board the awaiting vessel. One such train, which was exclusively for first-class passengers who were transferring from fancy London hotels such as the Savoy, broke down as it left the station's platform 12, which in hindsight was quite an ominous omen. A Titanic boat train was photographed at Waterloo by Father Frank Brown, including one image in which he leant out of the carriage window as the train left the station, and he would go on to take a number of pictures on board the ship itself. Father Brown had a very lucky escape. Due to work commitments, he had to disembark at Cove in County Cork, Ireland, the Titanic's last stop before it headed out into the Atlantic. The proximity of Waterloo Station, combined with the nearby industry which existed along the South Bank at the time, meant the then very working class area in which Ned and his family lived would have been a chaotic place, full of smoke and noise. Elm Street itself no longer exists, although you can still see a faded ghost sign for it in this brickwork. Meanwhile, nearby Rupel Street and Widdersley Street, both of which are also off of Cornwall Road, give a good idea as to how the area would have looked during Ned's time. Ned was one of 6 children. He had 3 brothers and 2 sisters, and the Parfits, who had strong Irish connections, were devout Catholics. As such, Ned attended St Patrick's School and Church on Cornwall Road, which is just moments away from his former home. Here, Ned proved to be a diligent and able pupil, and for the Christmas of 1909, his teacher presented him with a book entitled Uncle Boo as an award for good attendance. Ned's father, George, was a scaffolder by trade. He'd been involved in major construction work on Westminster Cathedral during the 1890s, but a serious accident put an end to his livelihood and left him needing the use of a walking stick for the rest of his life. In order to make money, therefore, George turned his hand to selling newspapers, and before long his son Ned was doing so too. Ned's usual pitch was close to his home, at the foot of Waterloo Bridge, but when he collected the papers on April 16, 1912, and learnt of the Titanic disaster, he took the canny decision to head across the Thames and sell them outside the White Star Line's Oceanic House office. As this photograph, also taken that day, shows, it would seem that Ned wasn't the only one with this idea. The newspaper touted by Ned was called the Evening News, and this is the front page from that day. Interestingly, it gives a detailed description of the scene outside Oceanic House, which reflects what we see in the photographs taken. The scenes at the White Star offices in Cockspur Street today were pitiful beyond description. The telephones were going all the time to answer calls which came not only from London, but from all parts of the country. Men wearing top hats and frock coats strolled up to the offices, entered, left again with tight lips, and were back again within an hour. Business was impossible in the midst of brain-racking suspense. Many inquirers arrived in cabs. A well-dressed woman, inquiring for her husband, emerged with tears in her eyes. She groped for the handle of the cab, and the bystanders caught a sight of her sitting with a frozen face, her head between her hands. As the day wore on, a constant succession of motorcars and taxicabs drove up, and it was necessary for the half-dozen policemen, who had been placed on special duty outside and inside the building, to keep a passage clear on the pavement. In the late summer of 1914, just over 2 years after the Titanic sank, the Great War erupted. Ned's two older brothers, George and Richard, joined the army immediately, and Ned signed up as soon as he was old enough to in 1915, first training with the Royal Horse Artillery, before going on to become a gunner with the Royal Field Artillery. Throughout the following years, Ned proved to be an excellent soldier and a dependable friend. He was even mentioned in dispatches on the 7th of April 1918, after displaying extraordinary courage during a heavy bombardment and gas attack. His bravery was also rewarded with the Military Medal, the British Army's decoration for acts of gallantry and devotion to duty under fire. On many occasions he accompanied me during severe shelling, an officer later wrote of Ned, and I always placed the greatest confidence in him. On the 29th of October 1918, Ned was based in Verchain, a small village in France, not far from the Belgian border. That evening he was due to go on leave to England, but before departing he was told to report to the quartermaster to collect some fresh clothes. Whilst Ned was in the store though, an artillery barrage erupted, and a large shell struck the hut, killing him, along with two other men, William Scott from Manchester and Henry Strachan from Edinburgh. This attack occurred just 2 weeks before the armistice was signed, bringing an end to the horror of World War I. In a cruel twist, the Parfit family back in London didn't find out about Ned's death until shortly after the armistice and ensuing peace celebrations, meaning they would have no doubt expected their 22-year-old son to be returning home soon. Ned's mother and father discovered the heartbreaking news when they received a dreaded telegram at their Eftham Street home. When the telegram was delivered, their daughter Nellie wasn't in as she was carrying out voluntary work in the nearby St Patrick's Church, and so a family friend went there to break the news. When she was told inside the church, the shock caused Nellie to collapse. Fortunately, Ned's brothers did survive the war, although George had a close call when he fell gravely ill during the influenza pandemic, and in December 1918, the family were mentioned by the South London Press in an article entitled The Fighting Parfits, which said, "Among the many records of fighting families must be included that of 4 sons of Mr. George Parfit of Ethelm Street, Cornwall Road, Waterloo, whose 4 sons have served their country, one to the death." Ned Parfit is buried in a little military cemetery at Verchain, close to where he was killed, alongside the 2 other men, William and Henry, who perished with him. In London, a memorial to those killed fighting for Ned's regiment, the Royal Field Artillery, can be found on the wall of the St Lawrence Jewry Church in Guildhall Yard. Although famous for being the Titanic newsboy, this image of Ned Parfit should perhaps also be seen as being representative of that generation of young people who, in 1912, were on the cusp of being dragged into the slaughter of one of history's most hellish conflicts. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this look at Ned Parfit's life interesting. If you did, I'd appreciate it very much if you could please leave a like and share, as that would be a huge help for the channel. And as ever, I'd like to take this opportunity to express my thanks to all of you who've left kind comments recently. I really do enjoy reading them. If there are any other Londoners such as Ned whose stories you'd like to hear, please do feel free to let me know. If you haven't yet subscribed to Rob's London, it'd be wonderful if you could please consider doing so, because this, along with clicking the bell icon to receive a notification, will ensure that you don't miss out on any future videos. You may also be interested to know that I have 2 books published: The Knowledge, Train Your Brain Like a Cabbie, and Waterloo, A History of London's Busiest Terminus, both of which are available online. I have an Etsy store too, Rob's Online Designs, where you'll find an array of hand illustrated mugs, featuring pictures of tube trains, taxis, buses and so on. Links are all in the description. For now, thanks again friends, stay well and please be sure to stay tuned.